Hello and welcome to the show with me, Jillian. Today I'm interviewing Lindsay Aamodt, a Norwegian name, who is the head of marketing for Upland, which is amazing metaverse, winning loads of awards, fastest growing metaverse in the space. And Lindsay Ann has very kindly agreed to be interviewed today. And I want to talk to her about her background and what led her to becoming the head of marketing for Upland. So Lindsay, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I am very excited because you are quite an unusual background, unusual woman. I'm going to start off with you're an athlete, a professional athlete. You're representing your country and your county in ice skating and also downhill racing as well. Ice skating, that is, I mean, did you start doing that as a young child? How does one become a professional or competing at national level at ice skating? How does that happen?
Many years of practice, lots of cold mornings. I guess it started because my brother played hockey, and when I was 4, I would go to his practices, and after the practice would finish, all of the ice skaters would get on the ice, and they had their beautiful dresses, and obviously it's such a beautiful sport. It's very athletic, and it's very it has a beautiful aesthetic. So I fell in love with it right away, and I asked my parents if I could start to take lessons. And, by the time this was at 4, by the time I was 9 or 10, I was already competing up and down the East Coast of the United States, because that's where I grew up. And it got really intense really fast, because it's just a very active sport, and competing is a big part of, how you progress into some of the more mature, levels that you can kind of earn as you go along. And it takes, hours and hours and hours of practice. So it was, from grade school all the way through high school, it was early mornings, going to school, going back to the skating rink, which happened to be across the street in my hometown, to skate again. I was in Connecticut. My coach was in Rhode Island and Cape Cod. So I would have to drive there on the weekends, and which was like 3 hours away, to go meet with my coach to skate for 5 hours on a Saturday. And then my parents would drive me back for 3 hours. So it's pretty time intensive. But I mean, I think it gives you a sense of discipline and purpose at a very, very young age, because you're really, getting to see what it's like to actually commit to something so deeply.
I think unlike other sports, and obviously you competed at a very senior level, other sports, maybe it's twice a week you're doing the football training or the practice, or maybe and a game on the Saturday or the weekend, but it's full on. How many days a week were you training?
Every day.
Every day. Oh my goodness. Did you feel you missed out on stuff that as a young person?
Oh yeah, and I think I actually delayed my maturity. Yes, as a young girl, I definitely was a late bloomer, because I was, didn't have a lot of friends that were from school. My friends were from skating, and then that was kind of an interesting dynamic, because those are the people that you're competing against. You're always competing with the other person, because it's not a team sport. It's very much an individual sport. So it's all about, finding your personal best and then comparing that to the people that are supposed to be your friends. So it was every single day, but it's not just all on ice. I mean, there was a lot of off ice training as well. So, there would be lifting, there would be ballet. We had a lot of different, in my college years, we had several Russian coaches that actually did a lot of the off ice trainings with us, and a lot of the ballet. So they were like professional ballet dancers that were giving us strength and grace in our body through that particular discipline, which applies very easily to the ice as well. So wow. It wasn't all on the ice.
And tell me, until what were the most senior levels that you reached, and at what age were you competing, and until what age?
So I took a break for a few years in high school, and that was when I started downhill ski racing, because I wanted to try something.
You weren't busy enough.
Yeah, I realized that I was starting to feel a little sense of burnout, because I was skating so much and competing all over the place up until like 13, 14 years old. And it was starting to have a little bit of a mental toll on me that I felt, and started to become a little bit more aware of myself. So I took a break and then started downhill ski racing, which I really liked because I got to see that I was faster than a lot of the boys. And
How fast would you race when you're going downhill?
I don't know. I don't, in miles per hour. I have no idea. Just really fast. And this was before helmets. So it was pretty scary.
Is this where you jump off the big, huge board, the big, huge platform thing?
No. So there's at the top of the hill, there's kind of like a bank that you go down, and then there's the flags. There's slalom, where you can kind of take tighter turns, and then super GS was my event, which was like, straight downhill, but huge sweeping banking turns through some of the flags. The reason why I think I like that was because it was with my school. So I got to really start to connect with more of my peers and other students from the school. So it kind of brought me back into the community and not so separate because of all the skating that I was doing previously. But coming back to your question, so when I applied for college, I had a decision to make. I was going to go to Boston University on a skiing scholarship, or I was going to go to Miami of Ohio, and I realized they had a skating team. And when I went to go visit the two schools, I saw the ice, and there's something about a rink for a skater or a hockey player. There's a smell to it that's very, very home-like. Once you kind of feel the air of the ice, you immediately bring back a flood of memories from all of your times, because they all smell the same because of the rubber mats. So I walked into the rink before I had committed to the school, and I just knew immediately that I needed to be there. So that summer after I committed, I worked really, really hard to get my skating legs back and to start to work with different coaches because it was a different discipline of skating. It was more ice dancing. And I had to figure out how to shift from more jumping and spinning to now dancing on the ice. And I found specific coaches that kind of helped me train that summer. When I got to the school, it was obviously a huge collegiate transition in my life, but then obviously also as an athlete, it was a huge transition. So I tried out, made the varsity team, because there was actually a varsity skating team. And we competed at the senior level. That first year, we won the national title down in Florida. And then we went to Sweden to actually compete in the world competition and placed pretty high in that as well. So it was that first year back in skating, it was like 0 to 100. And figuring out how to be a college student at the same time was pretty challenging.
And what age were you when you stopped competing, and why?
The reason why I stopped, first of all, I was 20. No, I was 19. I was 19. The reason why I stopped is because, we had already been to 3 different world competitions. There wasn't an Olympic sport yet for synchronized skating, which is what the discipline is called. In fact, the IOC typically brings in new sports to bring in new audiences and to kind of, increase viewers and interest in the Olympic Games. At the time, they were taking women's hockey over synchronized skating. So I realized that I had peaked, in essence. I had gotten to the top. As a little girl, you dream of going to the Olympics, but that wasn't the option. So I realized that, I needed to broaden my horizons. And so I took another summer after my junior year in college to completely transition to another school, which happened to be in Paris, France, which is a huge passion of mine.
That's a nice swap. I commend you on that one.
From the cornfields of Ohio all the way to Paris, France. So I transferred all of my credits, and I started university September 1st, my 21st birthday, 2001, landed in Paris from New York. 10 days later, 9/11. Paris,
oh my goodness. Did you go home? No, you stayed. You stay?
No, you couldn't leave.
Yeah.
Couldn't leave.
Whoa.
Oh,
okay, that was hard. I'm not saying you were homesick, but just to be away and if this to happen, horrendous. So tell me then, going back then to the fact that you had competed at such a high level from such a young age and so dedicated. what are the main takeaways from being an athlete in a very demanding sport that you bring to business nowadays? And what would you not bring with you? So the good things you bring with you and the bad things you leave behind, perhaps.
The good things, I think the first and foremost is discipline. One of the things that I kind of live by is I don't really believe in a second wind or living off your adrenaline, right? Adrenaline coming from short-term success, right? That usually fuels additional energy to, keep going, whether it's in business or sport. And, I really believe in the power of discipline. And what discipline does is it forces you to zoom out and think of the long-term efforts that you're making to contribute to the success of your company, which is why if you look back at my tenure, I've usually been in companies for a pretty long period of time. I don't have a lot of former positions where I had short tenure. I'm usually, I tend to be loyal and stick with it because it's kind of built in my DNA that, working hard and being disciplined to, assume the journey of achieving success that doesn't come overnight is one of the values that I live by in all aspects of my life. The other thing, I think, being a figure skater, right? There's a sense of polish that comes with performance. And one of the things that, my dad impressed upon me from an early age is being professional. And I think that being professional in the way you conduct yourself, in the way you present yourself, in the way you perform, if you were to speak, I think there's an art form to that that applies in business because it helps to increase credibility and also, I think, approachability as well. Going from individual figure skating to team skating, I now believe in the power of the team. And as a leader, as a manager of a big team at Upland, my job is to make my team successful. And if they're not, I usually look at myself and wonder how I'm not helping to elevate them in their professional careers. It's on me to figure out what their strengths are and to build upon those strengths and help them understand their contribution to the whole, as well as, help them work through some of the areas where they're not as strong, and help educate them about, the big picture of, business-oriented thinking, revenue-minded thinking, retention-minded thinking when you speak about marketing disciplines. That's part of the team aspect that comes from sport. It's all of the pieces have to be strong in order to create a successful result. So I don't ever look at the way I orient myself with my team or my colleagues. I really think about, how do I make a contribution that strengthens all of the others? How am I always mindful of, from a marketing perspective, I'm always thinking about how can I optimize every single aspect of the funnel? I can't just fix acquisition and assume that monetization is going to improve. I can't just fix retention and assume that acquisition is going to improve because those two things are unrelated. You have to think about the entire funnel and how all the pieces work together. So those ideals come from living that way for all of my development years as a human being.
And especially synchronized sport. It's not like even like a together sport. That's you're pretty close in there. Is there anything that you learned from your professional or amateur but high level sporting career that you would not take with you into work?
Well, there's an ugly side to skating. There can be an ugly side to skating. So I think wholeness in all of its parts and not just physically, but mind, body, and soul has been a big part of my life now that I don't think that I assumed when I was younger. The intensity in your physical body and not the balance of you mentally or spiritually, that's kind of like 1/3 of the whole of the whole. So you're really just a physical person. And when I started to burn out, I realized that there was some imbalance in my life. And that's when yoga was introduced to me. because I was a very nervous competitor. I still get a lot of stage fright in lots of different scenarios, especially as a female in business with a completely male dominated room where you have to make strategic decisions and allow your voice to be heard. I get stage fright sometimes. That's part of, my experience as a skater. But I think that when I was introduced to yoga, it taught me how to breathe. It taught me how to be more aware of where I was in the present moment. It taught me how to be more centered and to trust myself. And I'm not just talking about the physical side of yoga. I'm actually talking more about the spiritual side of it, the breathing side of it, the non-violent towards yourself, non-attachment side of it towards all aspects of your life. That was really supportive. So I guess the thing that I wouldn't take with me from sport is like the constant physical intensity without the balance of the other things that you have to be mindful of in your life. So
that's good. And actually, you've touched on two other areas of your personal life that I want to talk about before we go into your business life, how it informs it. You're a member of the Chief Network, which is a private women's networking group. You've also won a lot of awards, most recently, most inspirational woman in Web3. So being a woman in this space, is it difficult, and how do you help others in this space?
I think it was difficult when I was first starting out, because I was still learning about, what everything was and what it all meant and how to really, have a business mindset, a revenue mindset, a retention mindset, a growth mindset. I think experience gives you the confidence to find your voice, because you can kind of learn from some of the things that you kind of didn't do as well, or you can build from the things that you did do well. I think for many, many women who are just starting out in this space, it's a very new space with a lot of unknown. It's confusing. There's a lot of different types of information about crypto, about blockchain, about Web3. I think that people have different definitions of Web3. So it can be confusing to navigate. But I think that experience and being hungry to learn and not afraid to ask questions is the way to find your footing. I know that at Upland, the culture is very, very positive in the sense that it really nurtures people that are hungry to learn. And it's very welcoming to people that ask a lot of questions, because
women ask a lot of questions, don't they?
Yeah.
The women ask more than men do. I think they're less afraid to appear as if they don't know the answers. So do you think then, in terms of like the culture where you're working now and how you approach it, it's the eagerness to learn is more important than the gender?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Because I don't think that it applies. I think because this is such a new space, because nobody knows what all of the answers are, it kind of levels out the playing field. It becomes genderless just by the sake of the fact that whoever has the most guts to make a database decision and execute and learn from it and keep asking questions, I think that's where we as women have a huge opportunity. But you have to be fearless, and you have to be humble enough to say, I don't know what that means. I don't get that. I don't understand why this particular, detail yields this result. And then be willing to and be disciplined to kind of figure that out. I'll tell you, at Upland, one of the things that we're trying to understand right now is, acquisition, the acquisition side of things, finding new users, finding different ways to educate different types of audience about what the benefits of Upland, Web3, and true ownership are. And there's not one answer. So it takes a lot of research. It takes, getting in front of users and having, very deep user interview, sessions with them to learn about what were some of the reasons why they came to Upland. What are the benefits that they have? And guess what? There's so many different answers. So you have to be willing to learn and keep asking questions about the whys behind the users that you have in order to find more.
So be curious. I think you're right, because and the other point you made is so true. it's such a new space. There are no experts here. We're all learning. We're all one paragraph ahead of the next person. So you mentioned also the yoga. You've been teaching yoga and Pilates the last 20 years. And I think you were saying you're not the gentle yoga type. Are you the shouty yoga? Before someone signs up for some of your classes, tell me about how you teach and what that brings to your work experience.
Yeah, so the reason why I'm a little raspy today is because I taught a 6:30 Pilates class this morning. It's an hour-long class in 110-degree heat. The community that I am privileged to work with, the message is get uncomfortable, right? Because most of us don't live our lives purposefully looking for reasons to be uncomfortable. If anything, we do the opposite. We listen to podcasts, we read books, we listen to music, we scroll through football fields of Instagram. We distract ourselves from all of the things that make us uncomfortable. And then we lose the ability to train ourselves how to cope through difficult periods of time. And the way I kind of conduct my class is it's purposefully intense, purposefully chaotic. It's some people say I'm like a hurricane in that room. I always joke with new people, and especially when like a friend brings a new person, I'm like, you realize you're not going to be friends after this class, right? Like, I like to kind of like get under their skin and like start the theme of being uncomfortable right from the beginning. So I'll usually say, like, if you came for a 45-minute class, this class is going to be 75 minutes. So you're in for it. Now you're committed. There's no leaving. The door's locked, so you can't leave. And I always like kind of joke with them just to kind of break the ice.
Yeah.
And you know, what I kind of think about is how are we training ourselves to cope with difficult times? We're setting ourselves up for failure by never practicing the art of being uncomfortable and finding your way through it. So imagine crypto, imagine the industry of crypto going through the FTX crisis in November of 2022. Chaotic, uncomfortable, unknown. A lot of people had really negative things happen to them. How do we cope with that? And how do you navigate through that period of time, or even going from a bull market to a bear market? It's not like you practice when that happens, right? Experience gives you some level of practice because you've been through it before, especially if you're of a certain age where you've kind of been around the block more than twice. But, you know, most of us avoid being uncomfortable. We live in cycles and habits that kind of, you know, numb us to feeling anything. And I say, the more you feel, the more you heal. And the more uncomfortable you get, the more you learn how to handle those situations when the shit hits the fan.
Yeah. Do you know, you remind me, I'm just reading a book recently by Chris Hadfield, the astronaut. Is it Hadfield, I guess? The Canadian astronaut. And he talks about sweating the small things. And he said, oftentimes girls say, don't sweat the small things. He said, no, do. Because if you don't do that, you don't know how to fix them when they come. And then there's bigger ones and bigger ones on top of it. And it's interesting that you're right, because we do as a people not want to be uncomfortable. We want to make things nice and smooth and not argue with the neighbors and just, you know, model along. And so does that then help you when, because we're both working, you and obviously at the forefront are working, it's a very disruptive industry. So does that help that approach to this is disruptive on so many levels?
All of this is uncomfortable. It's completely unknown. One of the questions that Dirk, the co-founder Dirk Luth of Upland, asked me when I was interviewing for the role, he said, how comfortable are you with the unknown? I said, that's where I thrive, because the unknown means that it's up to me to create. And if it has to be, it's up to me. It's the power of what I choose to do in my execution phases of making database decisions in my role, that I get to define what that path is. And I don't have to worry about an expectation of what I think is going to happen, because I'm going to learn through what actually does happen because I didn't expect it. It's unknown. And I think I like the unknown more than I like the expectation and the potential disappointment of things you think are going to happen, because A plus B equals C. In Web3, that's not the case. No, A plus B takes you to Z, and the path is not straight. It's very curvy. And, you know, in my experience with Upland, you know, I went from super high growth in 2022 to having to get really smart about how to acquire users, how to monetize users, how to retain users, because it's a completely different market. You know, and I was talking to somebody who said, oh, I'm a rock star in user acquisition. Well, great. If you're a rock star in 2022, you're not going to be a rock star in 2023, because you're what we like to say at Upland is you're building the plane while you're flying it.
And you like being in that position.
Absolutely. I love it.
You know.
And they even asked me, how do you thrive in chaos? I was like, absolutely. Because I know how to apply my version of balance to chaos. So it's like, I'll give you an example. In my Pilates class, we do 10 minutes of burpees. 10 minutes of straight up burpees.
That's tough.
With a combination of abdominals, jump squats, mountain climbers, and burpees. Those are the 4 exercises in Pilates that people, the minute you say them, they immediately think, oh God, here we go. And I'm like, you're usually going to surprise yourself before you let your mind take you out of the ability to think that you can actually do something. So 10 minutes of that, right? It's a song that's like completely chaotic. When you get into the motion of doing something, when you actually allow yourself to move forward, you'll notice that you get quieter in your center despite the chaos on the outside. And what happens is the chaos orbits around you, but you're the center of the cyclone. And the center of the cyclone is quiet and strong and stable. And that's kind of how I think about, you know, where I am when things are getting really crazy or the pressure's on in business, or, you know, there's so many things happening that I can't figure something out. It's like, I know how to find my center so that I can make, you know, diligent steps forward in what we do next.
Because you are the solution. You're not the problem. Interesting. So then metaverses. So your background, your professional working background, marketing, VR, what is it about metaverses that appeal to you?
I mean, it's very on brand for what I love to do, which is, you know, innovate and do, like, really believe in the future. I'm very future driven because I've seen the benefits of how tech has really changed my life. I think with the metaverse, we're still trying to all figure out what that's going to look like in 5-10 years down the road, how it's going to completely transform the way we are in the real world and the way we are in the digital world. You know, at InView, at Together Labs, what I loved about it first was the power of connection, the power of friendship, and the power of community. And those are some of the strongest pillars of Web3, the first one being community. I know that, and I always get a little shy when there's an article or an award, because it's not just me. It's my entire team that made these decisions together. I really kind of equalize how I am with my team and my colleagues and my peers and even the industry. So the idea of community is something that is really, really important to me, because I think that we're all in this together. You know, none of us need to think that we're so alone, because, you know, we're all doing this together, and there's always people to kind of reach out to and support you and learn from. The second thing that I really loved is just the fact that, you know, I get to be part of defining what the future is. So when there was the internet innovation, you know, the people that were behind what the internet has become. I mean, I'm old enough to have had part of my life without the internet, and I know what the internet serves for me today. So I think being alive through that kind of huge digital transformation, I'm excited about doing that, so that my legacy is the future that we are building in Web3 and the metaverse. Though we may not know all the benefits of how it will transform the world and its individuals, but we get to define that by learning as we go. And I just think that's really motivating for me. I think that that inspires me. And I know that both of my co-founders have inspired me with their visions, but they've also allowed me to start to innovate on my own and apply those to the Upland community.
Which brings us nicely to the Upland community and the Upland platform where you're working. Could you tell me what makes Upland different for you? Obviously, there are so many metaverses out there, and Upland's obviously, it's been around for a long while and it's very well established, loads of awards. But what is it that attracted you towards Upland? And what is the vision, do you think? You mentioned the vision, creating the vision. So what attracted you, and what can you see happening in the near and medium future, perhaps?
The most obvious is that the real world and the digital world have to coexist. The two have to be mutually beneficial to each other. One of the things that Upland does differently is the metaverse that's mapped to the real world. So immediately you have that connection from the metaverse to the real world. So if you think about all of the places where you have memories or home or, emotional connection, that is directly applied to its digital counterpart inside of Upland. And the way people buy properties in Upland, it's not just, pick from a random list of virtual real estate. It's normally people choose very specifically based on an aspirational motivation of having a property in Manhattan, Los Angeles, or buying their childhood home address in San Francisco or in Queens, or buying their grandma's house in Detroit. So there's already that immediate connection. The other thing that I really liked about it is that it's very easy to understand and practice true ownership and virtual real estate with Upland. And it is also one of the best crash courses into blockchain, because it's based on the same tenets as a board game that we've all played with it, which is Monopoly.
Yeah.
You already understand from your childhood how to play Upland if you've played Monopoly. That is so easy. It's already innate and built within us. Now you layer on true ownership and earning real world value and building value for yourself, being an entrepreneur, empowering yourself to create. And that's where you get to choose how far you take it. So you can play small, you can buy properties that are meaningful to you based on the addresses that you choose. You can build on them, you can sell them, you can, trade them with friends, you can build a huge collection and start to earn a yield on what you own. Or you can kind of level up and go all the way to Upland Executive, where you're starting to build a digital empire. And the people that are our users, I spend a lot of time talking to our users. That's one of the things that I really value as, my most effective use of time. They believe that in building value for themselves in the real world, they are building the future. So they're kind of doing it alongside us. They already understand that it's, it's slow and steady growth. It's not like, just like in real estate, like we don't start with our $2 million house. You start with whatever you can afford as early as you can start investing in real estate as a young professional or a young adult, if that's where your values are. And then you slowly grow and you start to slowly build wealth. And that it just makes sense. It's easy to understand.
So where would you say that Upland is now? And again, back to that future thing. So, and where do you see it being in like the short to midterm or even long term?
So when I started, Upland was all about the playing and earning aspect of buying properties, building on them, and, selling them or exiting to fiat. Now we're in metaverse super app mode. And what I love about that is now we are building a true metaverse, because inside of, the first layer value proposition is buying and selling properties. The second layer is now building immersive spaces on those properties where people and users can start to add more value to others. It can come in the form of a cafe where users can socialize and have that community aspect that's very much a part of Web3. They can build their own store, which is the entrepreneurial benefit of Web3 in the metaverse, where they can sell some of the assets that they own. And that's where the secondary market starts to become very powerful. They can build a game where users can play with each other, against each other, alongside each other. And it kind of creates more opportunities to have immersive experiences outside of just the buying and selling part. That's kind of just the tapestry from which we're now building depth and innovation beyond, where we were before.
And what would be your particular love? What do you enjoy doing most in Upland as a visitor, as a citizen?
As me as a user? I think buying properties and building an empire, for sure. Like, I think there was a TikToker that kind of said it the best. And he said, if you want to play an app that makes you feel like a boss, play Upland. And there's a sense of like fulfillment that comes, because everybody knows it's really hard to buy a house in the real world these days.
Yeah.
So hard. It's such a high barrier now. It's so expensive. But when you can kind of practice those same skills in Upland, like buying properties and kind of like starting to sprawl out the things that are owned by you all around the world, which is the same as, or the digital twin of the real world, like that kind of makes you feel good. There's a sense of accomplishment and, boost that comes from that. And I know that that's what a lot of our users love too. Like when we have our executives come to our Genesis Week event every June in Las Vegas, there's definitely a flex that comes with being an Upland executive and knowing that you own a mini empire in the metaverse.
So cool. So if people want to find out more, Lindsay, where should they go to find out more about Upland and to find out more about you if they want to contact you?
Yeah. So Upland is on the App Store, both app stores, Google Play and the App Store. It's a mobile and web app. So what I love about it is that it's the metaverse in your fingertips on your mobile device. You can also go to upland.me, which stands for metaverse. That's our URL. I'm, of course, on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter, and I'm on Instagram. My Instagram is Fly Lindsay Fly, which is more of my Pilates and yoga messaging and inspiration.
So if people want to join your class, they go to Instagram, Fly Lindsay Fly.
Fly Lindsay Fly, and they can take virtual classes that are online. Yeah.
That's check that out.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for your time today. Fascinating. And Fly Lindsay Fly. I'm gonna check it. You can't see me. Sure you can't. If I'm doing bad Pilates in the background. There's none of this. I can see you over there in the corner. I'm going to do that. Oh, dear. Thank you so much indeed, Lindsay. It was brilliant.
Thanks, Jill. It was so nice to do this with you. Thanks for having me.